Hey guys, how you doing? Rich here. So a lot of you have been asking me to talk more about how I record vocals, my vocal chains, what plugins I'm using, how I'm getting the sounds that I'm getting out of the videos that I've been posting. And so I figured I'd have a little bit of fun with this. I had a opportunity to do a cover recently with a group of people that I'm collaborating with. It's a 1975 cover of the song She's American. And before I jumped into top lining the vocals, I figured that I would take this opportunity to show you guys how I would go about recording these vocals and take you through that process. So I hope that this video is going to be helpful for you guys, and even if you get a little bit closer to the sound you're looking for, I hope this kind of helps you get there. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about some of the hardware that I use. So the most important thing for any singer, anyone looking to record good vocals, is the microphone. And a lot of you know that I love Warm Audio. I've been using them for a while. I have the WA8000 from them and the WA47, which is right behind me over there. I love both microphones. I use them for different applications. The WA47, the way I would describe the difference between them is that it almost sounds like someone's putting your hand in front of your mouth, right? There's a little bit of loss of clarity, but that also adds warmth and some body to the sound as well. And it works for some applications. It doesn't really work as well for others. I tend to favor the 8000. And the reason for that is it gives me a little bit more clarity. I tend to like to do pop songs and pop music, and for that, the sound that I like is something with a little bit more clarity around it, and this just gives me that. There's a reason that people like Justin Bieber love a microphone like this, and it's because they like that kind of clarity, that vocal that cuts through the mix. And if that's what you're looking for, this is a great option. But it's also important to note that it's not great for everybody. There's some people that come into my studio here and this just doesn't sound amazing on them, and something like the 47 might be a better fit, or even something, let's see if I can fit it over here, something like the SM7B, which I use quite a bit, might be a better fit for them because there's too much clarity in the vocal and it's just a little bit too much high end. So find what's right for you. Experiment, rent microphones, go to studios and try them out. Talk with friends and see what they have and try those out and see what fits your voice best and what fits the voice of the people that you're recording if you're a producer and that's what you're doing. So first things first, get a good microphone like this. Okay, so the second piece to the hardware is the interface that you're using to get into your DAW or whatever you're using to record the music that you're doing. So I use Universal Audio Apollo X4. The X4 has been absolutely incredible for me. I was using Focusrite for a while. They're 18i20, and I switched over to the X4 when I built this new space for myself, and it's been absolutely incredible. There's a couple of reasons that I use the X4 over something like their twin. Firstly, it gives me more inputs. What's really important for me is that I get into this space and I'm able to just record, right? All of my microphones are hooked up to this thing. So I have 3 mics hooked up to it at the moment, and then I have my piano in the back that's always hooked up, and then I have 2 ports at the front where I can connect a guitar or line-in instrument. So I have at my fingertips the ability to just record, and that's really important for me. Now for you, you might prioritize traveling with the unit or something like that. So figure out what you're looking for out of the unit. All of the Universal Audio interfaces are absolutely incredible, and it's the first step to getting a really good sound. So a lot of you are asking, hey, I have a Warm Audio microphone and it doesn't quite sound the way that you sound, or that the clarity is not quite there, or the warmth isn't quite there. And it's got a lot to do with the preamps you're using. You can use plugins, and I do, and we'll get there, but ultimately you want to have a really good interface. It's the first step between the microphone and your DAW, right? Or whatever you're using to record. And so that's really, really important. So think about that. Buy a good quality interface, even if it's a small one, that doesn't have a lot of inputs. Find one that works for you. And for me, Universal Audio, there's a reason that everybody uses these things. They're absolutely fantastic. I've got nothing but good things to say about them. The only thing to mention is I like a lot of tracks. I produce quite a bit, and so that requires a lot of DSP power, I've found. And so after buying the X4, I had to buy the satellite unit as well. That gives me a lot more DSP power, and so I can essentially have as many tracks as I want to at any given time. And so again, you might find that you need more than just the unit. So look at that DSP as well and try to understand how much DSP you might need before you jump into a unit so that you can right size it appropriately, or you can add it at a later date as well. So they give you that option. Okay, so after you have the microphone and the interface, the next important thing is to have a good DAW. Now, I've used Pro Tools and still do. I have used Logic quite a bit, Ableton. I'm well versed in all of them, but over the last year, I've really just been using Luna for the most part. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, I really love the interface. I think it's super intuitive. I love the ability to add preamps before the inputs, right? So that's giving me the ability to color the sound and keep that as though I'm plugging into a hardware unit. Not any of the others give you that ability to do that, I've found. Or not quite as well as Luna has. And I'm using universal audio gear anyway. So Reason tells me that this is built for this tool, and so it works really well together. And I have to tell you, I've had very limited issues with Luna in terms of crashing. It automatically saves my projects. It's an intuitive interface. The DSP works really well on it. So ultimately, I'm really happy with that, but also give yourself the ability to pivot and learn those other tools as well, because you never know when it might be needed or when you might need to jump into some of those programs as well. Okay, so let's jump into Luna and see what we've got so far. So again, this is a cover of the song She's American by the 1975. I was sent over a track that had drums, bass, guitar work, and I was told to add keys and top line the vocals. And so we've done the key work already, and so let's just take a look at what this sounds like at the moment. Cool. It sounds really good. So now we have to add a vocal track. So we go here to track, we add new tracks. I like to call it lead Vox. Find a naming convention that works for you. Okay, it's going to create a track here. So this is something that I would do every time that I would record a lead vocal. So we're going to go in here to our track. We're going to record, enable it. We're going to go to make sure that your input is correct, of course. In this case, it is. I'm in line 1. We're going to go to our unison preamps, and I'm going to add the Neve preamp here. Now, generally speaking, the preamps in the universal audio gear is really great and it sounds awesome. Sometimes I only use that, right? It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm just doing a quick cover for Instagram or something like that, I might just use this. But for something like this where it's a little bit more of a production, I like the sound of the Neve preamp. So I use the 1073. I have my preset. So it's some light EQ work, generally speaking, not much going on here, but again, it just colors the sound enough for me that I feel like it adds a little bit of warmth and body to the vocal. So now we're going to go on our hardware unit, and we're just going to turn up that gain to right around there, right? That's kind of where I like it, just over the 40 mark, and that's a starting point at least. Sometimes I might need a little bit more gain, sometimes a little bit less, but generally speaking, this is about the right position for me to start with. Right? Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be adding is a little bit of compression on the vocals. It's the first thing that I put in my chain. And the one that I like to start with is the TubeTech CL1B. Now, I would typically use the Mark II, but in the most recent version of Luna, for whatever reason, this plugin does not play nicely with it. So I have to use the older version of it. The interface isn't quite as nice, but it does the same job. So we're going to go in here, and these are my starting parameters for this. Typically, I'll be somewhere in this region there, We're gonna do a faster attack and a faster release. It's a bit of a faster song. It's at 116 BPM. It's a dancey track. It's a pop track. So I like a fast attack and a fast release. If it's more of a ballad, I'll change these parameters a bit, maybe a bit of a longer release and a bit of a slower attack. But generally to start, this is what I think sounds good. So this is kind of a good starting point for me. And then after that, I actually add a bit more compression here. We're going to put an LA2 after this, and we're just going to gain it up a bit, right? So I can gain it up somewhere between 30 and 40, somewhere in that range. Now, typically, if you were to put this first, your peak reduction, you would maybe have it somewhere down here or around 30, depending on the vocalist you're using. But since it's after the compression already, I can kind of add more and get away with more peak reduction without coloring the vocal too much. And again, this is a taste thing. Some of you are going to be like, whoa, that's way too much compression. For me, for the stuff I do, I think it sounds really quite good. So again, find something that works for you and the vocals you're doing and experiment with it a little bit. This is around my starting point, maybe a little bit less than that. So this is where I like to start with a vocal and then go from there. Now this is all I need to begin. So it'll give me enough gain to hear myself. This is enough in the chain at the moment to really make sure the vocals are sounding good, and then I'll add more after I actually record it. Now I need one more thing before I start, and that's a little bit of reverb. No one likes to sing or track vocals dry or completely dry, at least I don't. And so I'm gonna need to add a little bit of that. So what we do is we go to track, new tracks, and we're gonna add a verb bus to this. We're gonna call it Vox verb, and then we're going to create that, right? So here's our Vox verb. Fantastic. We're going to go in here, and since there can be some latency with other plugins, I strictly use Universal Audio's Capital Chambers when I'm tracking. Sometimes I change it afterwards to Valhalla or Lexicon or something like that, depending on the song and what I'm looking for. But to track, I always use this Capital Chambers plugin. I think it sounds fantastic, certainly good enough to track with. And I always use the same preset, and that's Angel Vocals by Damian Taylor. And I think it sounds absolutely fantastic. So that's my starting point. I'll go to lead Vox here. I will change the send appropriately to this Vox verb. Make sure that it's armed as well, so that you can actually change the parameters and that it tracks. I'll put it somewhere around there to start with, and then I'm off to the races. So that's everything that precedes me actually recording the vocals. Now let's record some vocals, and we'll be right back to add a little bit more. Okay, so I just recorded some vocals. Again, I used the WA-8000 to record, and let's hear what it's sounding like so far.
A big town, synthetic aberrations and not being lonely. Look, he's having a breakdown.
Cool. So super happy with that sound. Now, I like to pre-mix a little bit and get it in a place where I feel it sounds good while keeping the vocal at 0. So I recorded and changed some gain structures, tweaked the compression a little bit, and let's just look at what this is looking like at the moment. So I turned the threshold down slightly from where we were before, and I turned up the gain slightly, kept the peak reduction kind of where we were at. Okay, so that's kind of where we're sitting at the moment. I'm pretty happy with that. We might change some things after we mix it a bit, but for now, I think that's sounding really good. Okay, so the first thing that I would add here is the FabFilter Pro Q3. So let's just enable that for the moment, and let's go into it. So this is what I'm doing. I'm adding a low cut filter, and then I'm taking some of the mud out of this kind of lower mids. So let's just play the vocal.
Big town, synthetic aberrations and not being lonely.
So you'll see here where the peaks are, right? So I've taken the mud out here. So if you hold over this in the Pro Q3, this is one of the best parts of this plugin, I could see where all my peaks are, and the ones that I don't like so much, you can cue in on those and then systematically take some of that mud out of the mix, and then adding that low cut filter is going to add just a little bit more clarity to the vocal. So again, this is adding a light touch, but I think it makes a pretty big difference. So then with this filter, this is what this is sounding like. So pretty happy with that. So that, again, just doing a little bit of work there on the EQ. Doing a little bit more major work on the EQ, I'm going to add this C6, right? Now the C6 it's a multi-band compressor, and what this is doing is it's taking specific frequencies, right? And it's more surgically EQing this to make the vocal just more smooth. So some people really hate this tool and swear against it, especially because the Fab filter can do some of this stuff as well. I like to separate my multiband compression from just my general EQ work. And so you'll see this is not really doing any low cutting, but this is adding some de-essing to it, as well as taking out some of those harsh frequencies or taming those harsh frequencies. I have a couple different presets that I work with for my specific voice, but go in here and just look at the specific frequencies that are kind of hurting or helping the vocal, and then go in there and more surgically compress those things using multiband compression, and I think you'd be really happy with it. I think it's one of the secret sauces to what I'm doing at the moment, that's making the vocal feel more smooth and helping some of the more harsh frequencies in the warm audio mics. And so let's just take a listen to this and see what it's doing.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely. Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely. Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
It's just smoothing it out just a little bit. It's taking some of that harsh high end out of it, and it's taking some of the mid frequencies that I'm not too fond of and just taking them down just a little bit. The next thing that I'm adding, even though the C6 is doing a little bit of de-essing, I need to add a de-esser to take some of those harsh S's, those sibilant tones out. And so I use the Pro DS by Fab Filter. I think this thing is fantastic. This is a general setting. I think that their presets are pretty good, and there's no reason to tweak too much from there. But I like a little bit less harsh than the presets are, so I turn this range down a little bit, turn the threshold down just slightly. Just find the sweet spot where you're not changing the words. You can still clearly hear the pronunciation, but it's not harsh, right? So this is without the DS.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
This is with it.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
It's taking that harsh S out of that, where I can still hear the word, but it's not nearly as harsh as it was previously. So again, a little bit of de-essing in the chain. And the last thing that I'm adding is this C-Suite CVox. It's essentially taking some of the room noise and some of the, or just general noise that you might have going on, depending on what your recording situation is. Now, I have a pretty nice studio with acoustic treatments on the walls. There's not a lot of room noise here. It's a pretty dead room, but it still can be helped. You know, I'm not in a vocal chamber or something like that where things are super, super tight. And so I feel like just adding a little bit of this on some of the recordings that I do helps make it feel just a little bit more pro. So here's with it without.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
And here's with
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
Again, it's super, super light in terms of what it's doing, but it's just a little bit. Let's disable all this stuff. So I'm going to disable all of them. Let's hear what this sounds like.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
And then let's turn them all in.
Big town, synthetic aberrations are not being lonely.
So again, the mic sounds great, but when you start to stack the compression on top of the EQ, on top of the C6, with the de-essing that's going on, and then the C-Suite to just control the room noise, I think it's a winning combination. So on all of the recordings that I do, whether it's for myself or for other artists, this is the chain that I start with. I make tweaks from there, I add plugins where needed, but this is the sound that I like and the sound that I'm comfortable with, and the sound that you guys have been liking and asking for instruction on. So hopefully this was helpful. Let's take a quick listen to the chorus. There's some backing vocals there as well, and let's see where that's sitting at the moment.
If she likes it 'cause we just don't eat and we're so intelligent, she's American. And if she says I've gotta fix my teeth, then she's so American. She's American. And if she likes it 'cause we just don't eat.
Pretty happy with that overall. And one more quick trick that I'm adding there in the chorus is adding a delay to the chorus, right? It wasn't necessary in the verse because things are a bit more bare. When things get a bit bigger in choruses, adding that delay can add a lot of body to it, even a light delay. It's not one that's shouting. It's not something that you can really hear, but if you listen, there's a little bit of a delay that's adding body to the vocal, and it's panned appropriately as well. And then use panning too when you're doing background vocals, and experiment with where those things sit, so it gives you more of a wide spectrum. So hopefully that was helpful. This is my first time doing this, so please give me feedback on how it can be better. I hope that at least you've learned one or two things from this that can help you make your recordings just a little bit better. If you have questions, please, as always, leave them in the comments. If you like the video, hit the like button below, and follow me. It would mean more than you know, and check out some of my music that's on Spotify. That would be great as well. And I'll be back here with hopefully more videos like this, and thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all very soon.